Treasury has sparked a new pay row, announcing public sector workers will get what's been described as a miserly salary increase. Ministers claim that the 1% pay rise for workers, including doctors and nurses, is in accordance with its policy for 2016 to 2017. Representatives from workers' unions said the amount was nowhere near enough. In contrast, MPs receive a 1.3% income rise of £962. But their salary increase comes just 9 months after they received a backdated 10% pay rise from just over £67,000 to £74,000. Well, joining me now is Tony O'Sullivan. He's consultant paediatrician and co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public. Tony, with all the cutbacks, thanks to the government austerity measures, some will say, well, lucky to get a pay rise at all.
Well, I don't accept that at all on behalf of 1.3 million really dedicated NHS staff. There are definitely two standards, aren't there? I mean, the bankers who caused the crisis and the politicians that allowed it to happen. Jeremy Hunt is the head of the health service in England as Secretary of State for Health. He's the richest man in the cabinet. It's us and them.
What would you say then would be a realistic pay rise, bearing in mind that the lack of pay rises over the last few years, I'd imagine?
Well, there's two things, really. I mean, on the doctors' front, the junior doctors at the moment thrown into struggle, they're saying it's not about the money. Now, clearly, there is an issue about money. There's a 16% pay cut that's happened over the last 5 years in the public sector. Some people are finding it really hard to live in London, in the biggest section of the country and the biggest health service, and they cannot afford to live.
Particularly the lower earners within NHS.
Absolutely.
Nurses, for example. I mean, a 1% pay rise, but what does that actually mean in real terms for them? Well,
nurses are not the lowest paid. They are low paid, but they're not even the lowest paid. There's a lot of...
sort of lower paid anyway.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you're on 20,000 a year, a dangerous lowering of morale. There's a disconnect because there's a great dedication for public service from the staff in the health service, and there's a great determination to demoralise that staff coming from this government over the last 6 years now.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the government says that this pay rise has been implemented to ensure workers continue to deliver crucial public services. Just how is the NHS then delivering this crucial public service under the circumstances that you're describing?
Well, I think it's suffering from gross mismanagement by this government that had no political mandate to completely reorganise the NHS. So we're talking about a huge amount of money that's wasted by the market processes in the NHS. So conservative estimates are £4.5 billion a year. Other estimates go up to 10 or even 15 billion pounds a year of the national budget are wasted on marketised processes, tendering, and the profit that private companies are taking. So there's a huge misuse of public funds and abuse of the goodwill of low-paid workers, driving their salaries down by 16%. In fact, believe it or not, the NHS is still one of the best services in the world. It was lauded as that, as you probably know, in June 2014, using figures that were taking effect before the Health and Social Care Act came into force in April 2013. So a year later, 2 years later, the bite of those atrocious attacks on the NHS were beginning to take effect.
Tony O'Sullivan, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on RT UK. Good to hear your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Well, public sector workers, including teachers, may be receiving a 1% pay rise, but that still wouldn't necessarily amount to a £65,000